on to our third speaker, Dr. Gabriela Lichtenstein. Gabriela is the IUCN SSC Regional Vice Chair for Latin and Mesoamerica, and she's a researcher at the CONICET, the Argentine Research Councils, in her native Argentina. I have known Gabriela for quite some time, but bearing her wild camelids hat, she's the former chair of the South American Camelids Specialist Group. Gabriela's research has focused on the socioeconomic and political dimensions of sustainable use of wildlife and conservation, particularly on wild camelids. She also has delved on human-wildlife conflict and bringing academia with policy making on conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Today, Gabriela will talk to us about human-wildlife conflict from the sustainable use perspective. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Claudio, for the presentation, and thanks a lot, Alex, for organizing this wonderful and stimulating conference and for inviting me here to share our research today. So now I am going to take you from Africa to Latin America, and in this presentation, I want to illustrate how the relationship between one of the most representative species of Patagonian fauna, that is the guanaco, and human society changed over time, moving from coexistence to conflict. I am also going to present our project to enhance coexistence through sustainable use and the present challenges faced not only by the project but also by guanacos. I hope that the lessons that we learned from this project will also be of use to many of the projects that were presented and discussed along the conference. So, guanacos are wild South American camelids that are distributed from Peru to Tierra del Fuego. And the populations from Bolivia, Paraguay, and Peru are critically endangered, whereas the population from Argentina is thriving, and we have 95% of the world's guanaco population. However, the abundance of guanaco population within our country is very heterogeneous, and we find the most abundant populations in the south of the country. So the history of conservation and use of guanaco in Patagonia is as old as its first inhabitants. The species was a crucial source of food and raw materials for making tools, clothes, and shelter. The guanaco's social and symbolic relevance is also reflected in rock art from 9,000 years ago, as you can see here in the slide. Now, the small-scale guanaco use by indigenous communities came into crisis with the colonization of Patagonia. So the military campaign, called the Conquest of the Desert, resulted in a genocide of indigenous people in the region, the introduction of sheep and fences, and the replacement of a native species by an exotic species. So land was enclosed, privatized, and converted to estancias, which are massive ranches. So then came land degradation. And so the introduction of European farming systems in these fragile, arid landscapes, added to poor livestock practices and overstocking, quickly degraded native grasslands. So the guanaco became perceived by ranchers as a competitor for available forage, a cause of pasture degradation, and a threat to livestock. So guanacos, who were a vital resource for local communities, suddenly became a pest species with no social or economic value. So guanacos were killed in large numbers to enable more sheep to be introduced in Patagonia. The result was even greater overgrazing and desertification. This resulted in guanaco killings, and the export of large quantities of guanaco pelts from Argentina around the 80s without a sound biological basis resulted in CITES recommending to suspend guanaco imports until our country presented an appropriate management plan. So in 2006, the Argentine national and provincial authorities, together with scientists, with us from the South American Camelid Specialist Group, and with all of the provinces where guanaco is distributed, crafted a national management plan. The overall goal of the plan was to ensure guanaco conservation and to provide guidelines for life sharing in order to minimize conflict over the species and provide incentives for conservation. So in between 2000 and 2010, there were large numbers of guanaco life sharing experiences all over Patagonia. However, as soon as the guanaco management plan was approved, a number of ranchers, including this guy here, were already against it. They endorsed guanaco full responsibility for their problems, and especially for their economic problems, including road accidents. And the recovery of some guanaco populations in a scenario of increasing desertification intensified the conflict with the livestock sector. So by that time, my colleague Pablo Carmanchay and I were working with a local cooperative in Mendoza province, which is the northwest of Argentina, and we were helping them to set up a life sharing experience. So we have reached the conclusion that instead of a conflict species, actually the guanaco use could provide a great opportunity for conservation and local development. And why is that? On one hand, guanacos, as well as vicuñas, provide a unique model for sustainable use, where you can share guanacos and then release them. So you're dealing with live individuals. Guanacos, along as vicuñas as well, have one of the finest animal fibers that is sought after by the exclusive international markets, and companies like Europeana or Seña are really interested in having this fantastic fiber. To give you an idea, here in the UK, you're used to cashmere. Guanaco fiber is much softer, lighter, and finer than cashmere. With the largest guanaco population, Argentina could become a leader in guanaco textile exports. So we really believe that guanaco use can help towards economic development and to position our country in a niche market. And last, guanacos play a fundamental role in halting the desertification processes in arid ecosystems while providing an economic alternative to local producers. So they have the potential to revitalize marginalized rural communities and ancient traditions. So with this in mind, we managed to develop and implement a project among 4 institutions. The Cooperativa Payún Matru, which is the local cooperative of pastoralists, the National Research Council, where we work, the National Institute of Industrial Technology, and the local municipality. And here it is important to share that the cooperative members, most of them live below the poverty line with no access to electricity, communication, infrastructure, running water, internet. So we developed a project in order to improve the socioeconomic situation of pastoralists and foster coexistence with guanacos via the development of a commodity chain for the guanaco fiber. The project had 5 modules, but today I'm going to speak specially about the first 3 ones: how we produced fiber, fiber processing, and marketing. So the fiber production starts with herding guanacos, and this is based on the chacus, on vicuña management done by ancient Inca communities. But whereas in the case of vicuñas are herded by local communities that are held in hand by hand, given that guanacos are much larger than vicuñas, they weigh around 120 kilos, this is done by horsemen. So once guanacos are herded, they are moved to this funnel-shaped corral that ends up in smaller corrals, and finally it reaches an infrastructure that we built specially in order to share guanacos. So during this whole process, we are applying the South American Camelid Specialist Group Animal Welfare Protocol. And actually, this protocol was developed with this experience, and in the protocol we know what guanacos can be shorn, because, for example, pregnant females are not shorn, nor calves. How are they shorn, and in what time of the year? So this whole process was accompanied by research, but lots of PhD students that were doing the research looking at the behavioral and physiological and population impacts of all of these management. And finally, guanacos are released. Usually it takes 10 minutes, the whole procedure of handling and sharing. So the highlight, if you want, of this project was that we were able to build a spinning mill in a very remote village with all of the cooperative lives. So if you look at the photo above, you will see how remote the area is. So we were able to import special machinery from Canada in order to get to guanaco yarns and tops and even blends of different fibers. And so this is particularly important because this became the first and only mill that processes guanaco fiber in Argentina, which allowed local communities to capture the added economic value. Prior to its creation, all of the added value was done in Italy. So we also developed a marketing strategy that focused on fair trade of the products, and we explored certifications. We built a brand around the concepts of sustainable luxury, sustainable textiles, conservation, the history of the project, animal welfare, and the values involved. And so here we have a short video.
Los objetivos fundamentales que tiene este proyecto es desarrollar una actividad productiva en esta zona que permita generar mano de obra y empleo a la gente local. Y el segundo objetivo que tiene este proyecto es, a partir del uso sustentable de la especie, transformarlo en una herramienta de conservación del guanaco.
El grupo de la cooperativa está conformado con pobladores del área protegida, donde participan familias enteras. Nosotros vemos en el campamento las madres con sus niñitos, ayudando en la cocina, ayudando en la esquila. La idea de la cooperativa fue siempre vender el producto que obteníamos con valor agregado.
Se ha comprado maquinaria textil especializada que será utilizada para procesar la fibra de guanaco. ¿Por qué es importante esto? Porque esta es la primera vez que a una cooperativa se le otorgan los medios de producción. Entonces ya los integrantes de la cooperativa dejan de ser jornaleros para ser los dueños de su propia empresa.
Hemos hecho hasta 500, 600 gramos en mediodía, en 4 horas. Preparando bien la mecha, el hilo tiene que sale muy bueno. Es rapidísimo. Lo que yo antes en la rueca esta, para 1 kilo me demoraba 1 mes y medio más o menos. Ahora en 8 horas podemos tener 1 kilo de lana de guanaco y lana.
So that this program demonstrated how local communities can sustainably steward guanacos and get economic as well as social benefits. Sadly, at the same time, many ranchers from the southern provinces of Argentina lobbied the government to develop a plan that would include killing guanacos. the lobbying and PR campaign to change the guanaco management plan and the public perception of guanacos created a narrative of guanaco overpopulation and the alleged negative consequences that it generated. So, as a result, a new guanaco management plan was established in 2019 without the participation of the scientific sector, NGOs, and most Argentinian provinces. So, in this new plan, that is the one that is in place now, this plan was led by the livestock sector which has no knowledge of wildlife management. It lacks a scientific base and all of the animal welfare safeguards. It incorporates the extraction of guanacos and production of meat, pelts, as well as the fiber of dead individuals. It lacks transparency and traceability along the commodity chain. Therefore, it has the potential to increase poaching and illegal trade of guanaco fiber and meat. The plan does not reflect the heterogeneity of guanaco situations in the country, where we have some guanaco populations that are actually vulnerable and even endangered. And only 4 out of the 15 provinces from Argentina were consulted in the development of this plan. The plan obviously jeopardizes projects as the one that I showed before that are based on life sharing. And we also believe that it jeopardizes the one and only chance that Argentina had to establish a transparent market based on wildlife, on our wild species. So we believe that here there was a missed opportunity for conservation and local development. In the left-hand side, you can see our sharing with all of the cooperative and how the end product was, well, the fiber and then guanacos were released. Whereas this is what is happening in Santa Cruz now, where you have dead guanacos that are being shorn without the participation of local communities. Most of the product is meat, which actually doesn't have a proper and established market. So what could have been an opportunity to benefit the whole community became an extractive business opportunity for a few people. The rhetoric of sustainable use was co-opted to kill guanacos and make money. So what about the lessons learned? We learned many things along this process, but to summarize, we learned that complex projects require transdisciplinary approaches, that conservation projects do not occur in vacuum, but in certain socio-political contexts that need to be acknowledged. Nature conservation is a highly political process that entails power struggles and power asymmetries. A strong, sustained political commitment and an appropriate legal framework is required to accompany the projects over time. And the fact that a powerful group with resources can shape the narrative about a native species speaks to the need of a sustained lobbying and advocacy effort to counteract that information. So we believe that moving towards a guanaco livestock coexistence scenario, we need to look for holistic solutions that will combine livestock and rangeland management together with guanaco conservation. We have to stop having meetings within the conservation or guanaco experts, but work together with livestock experts, with people that are experts in rangeland ecology, and find solutions altogether. It is extremely important to promote the active participation of indigenous and local communities, which were actually not really visible along this process, as well as all the relevant stakeholders. It is important to take into consideration the scientific evidence and to implement an interdisciplinary approach that addresses the ecological, political, and socioeconomic dimensions of these complex projects simultaneously. So, to finish, I wanted to acknowledge my colleagues from the National Research Council and from the South American Camelid Specialist Group who contributed to this body of research and took part in the many workshops that we held over the years. We strongly believe that the implementation of the guanaco management plan should be suspended and that it should be revised with an inclusive and participatory process. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriela. I would like to invite Yvonne and Barbara to the panel, and we will take further questions from the audience. And if I may say, can we have the first question for Gabriela while she's still in the zone? Would you like to take a seat? Yes, here at the front. Jenny, third row. Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
If you don't mind stating your name and who the question is at.
Okay, my name is Dr. Salamo Tufada. I'm from North Wales and also from Nigeria. So I'm a conservation biologist. I feel very sad to see the management plan that you presented. My thinking now is it possible to raise awareness to the government, maybe through some sort of a protest, a bit of aggression, using campaigns? You could use young adults, you can use school children, and just create great awareness so that the government will not, cannot just put this under the carpets. They have to address it in some way. So you just do it maybe softly, but consistently, and make sure you draw a lot of attention so that everybody will come to the table to begin to talk together.
Thank you. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you. I think that, thanks for the question. I think that that's the way to go. In Argentina, the livestock sector is extremely important. So all of the newspapers are about cows and how bad guanacos are and that they are a pest species. So we should definitely try to work in this advocacy campaign in order to change the discourse. Yeah.
Thank you. Sandra, we'll take your question at the back.
Hi, muchas gracias por la presentación. It was really a great presentation, and I just want to thank you for bringing the animal welfare perspective into this. I'm hiding here in the corner. I thought that's one of the few times we've really heard how animal welfare can be included in these fantastic solutions. And it also reminded me of a talk that was given yesterday by the RSPCA on the International Consensus Principles for Ethical Wildlife Control, which really begins with, first of all, including all stakeholders. We've been talking about this entire conference, but also incorporating human behavior change as one of the first ideas and principles. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing this fantastic story to light, and I also agree with, hopefully we can revise that horrible management plan. But my question is do you see this framework being used in other contexts and other areas? Because I just would really love to share that message. So thank you.
Yes, we have another question. Would you mind raising your hand? Can you bring a mic, please?
Well, thank you, Gabriela, for an excellent presentation and all the other ones. But my question is for you, and it could be done simultaneously.
Speak up.
I'm sorry, with the other one. Do you see a place for the market and the international market and the local market in terms of the solution for this issue to promote the life sharing and the guanaco fiber being from live animals? Do you see that happening in the future, and is there a way that you see that happening?
Yeah, well, thanks for both questions. On one hand, with animal welfare considerations, we are using it either for guanaco and for vicuña sustainable use. Many other sustainable use projects are not based on live individuals. So for these cases, it's much easier to develop, well, and also it's important to make sure that those animal welfare considerations are taken into account. But yeah, I agree that this should be, animal welfare considerations are extremely important for all of the sustainable use experiences. And getting back to Ezequiel, we think that international market is crucial for these. Like here we have an amazing opportunity in which we are dealing with a species that is already perceived as extremely high quality and luxury by the international market. So we do need international markets. We do need certifications such as wildlife friendly, so that the story of the project and all of the values that are really not just words, but all of these things, women empowerment, local participation, conservation of large areas, all of those were extremely important values to our project. So we do need external markets to value what we are doing and to include this story in when they market their products. Yeah.
Yes, Yvonne, please.
Just to add something to that, because as you know, CITES is very much involved in some of these awareness campaigns of how, for example, with Vicuña, it was very well managed from stopping the dead shearing of the animals to live shearing of the animals. And it was involving markets and involving those high luxury markets to be involved. And I think you mentioned Loro Piani and you mentioned others. And I think that it's, and the same with crocodilians, when there was the poachers, we have lots of examples where the poachers became actually conservationists of these animals because they realized that there was to benefit them and their communities by going to market. And I think that indeed, if you were to bring in these luxury companies like Louis Vuitton, Moët Hennessy, they are very interested in giving the message that what is they're selling is sustainably sourced, and it's helping communities with, if you have the right certification showing that this is helping communities. We saw with Vicuña in particular how they were able to build schools and build hospitals and women empowerment, etc. That message going to the consumers is very important. So I think that involving all of these actors who are in the market is very important when you want to be able to make sure that things are done, when the animal is conserved and ensure that there doesn't have any menace against them when they're doing the shearing, etc. So yeah, I would advise maybe bringing those on board to give them the message.
Yeah, that's where we are so concerned about this present national management plan, because as soon as the fiber that is coming from dead guanacos is exported, as soon as the photographs that I didn't show from guanacos being killed, pregnant women, pregnant females with calves, etc., I think that we will lose lots of markets. So